All right, we are back again.
We're
Today we got
back.
Mr. Bobby Cove, Gecko Cove.
Gecko
Hey,
Cove.
How's
Mr.
it going, guys? Cheers.
Popularity.
Ah,
so why
need
don't you go
more.
ahead and tell us your reptile origin story?
Ooh, so long ago. Yeah. So, well, honestly, it has to start with just how much I loved animals growing up, right? Because it started there. I didn't start with reptiles. I started more with, the cute and fluffy kind, right? The dogs. Cats were never a big part of my life because my mom didn't like them, but that's okay. I have one now. They're great. Um, but I really didn't start getting into reptiles until probably about college. So around college, my first animal ever that was a reptile was a leopard gecko. I remember I was into fish a little bit, and then I saw a YouTube video where this guy had a leopard gecko just sitting on his shoulder. I'm like, that's a baby dragon on his shoulder. This thing is awesome, right? And so I did the stupid thing and went to the big box stores and picked up one. And but it was a Murphy's patternless. It was really cool. And yeah, just from there, I had him in college. People thought it was pretty neat. I was the weird guy who had crickets in his room. But it was kind of a way to draw people in, which was really fun. Then I rehomed that actually to a teacher. Funny enough, with me being in education, I, kind of lived my life without a lot of responsibility for a while, as you do in your early 20s. And then I got back into it a little bit later on when I was working in grad school as a dog trainer. And I was working again at one of those big box stores. And I fell in love with bearded dragons. So the bearded dragon that was at the store would come up to the glass and like always want to get out. And, I was just getting used to handling, just different animals. And so people would ask me questions because I'm walking around the store. And eventually I'm just like, this thing is so chill. It's just hanging on me, right? And so I actually had my dog with me as a dog trainer, walking around the store, selling classes, helping people out. And I had this bearded dragon just sitting on my shoulder for, 20-minute stretches at a time, and I thought it was the coolest thing. So talked to my fiance, now my wife, convinced her to let me get a bearded dragon. Went to a Scott Smith All Animal Expo, which is here in the Chicagoland area. Really, a lot of people, that's their first dive into reptiles, into the reptile world. Picked up a really cool bearded dragon, and the rest is history. I used it as a therapy animal in my counseling practice, and the kids loved it until the school realized that I brought roaches into the school, which I guess is, not their favorite thing, right? And then, so since I basically wanted to branch out into something else. The bearded dragon was fantastic for a few years, but it was getting harder and harder to get feeders. So rehomed that one. And around 2020, when everything happened, you guys know what happened in 2020, right? I had some extra tanks, but I was a little bit bored, and I knew I didn't want to get back into fish at the time. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll look into a species that can go in this tank, right? It was way too big for anything new cal species, even a lychee at the time. But there was someone who was willing to trade me, right? An enclosure, everything for a gargoyle gecko. And so that was my first love. So I traded for a baby gargoyle gecko and an enclosure, a big exoterra. So I kind of dipped my toe.
Nice.
Yeah.
So why was it difficult to get feeders? What was going on at that time?
Yeah. It was, I never had anything shipped in, but I moved from Chicago, and I was spoiled. So literally 2-minute walking distance was this place called Curious Creatures, which also kind of fueled my obsession with reptiles, right? And actually just bought a gargoyle from them this past weekend at Schaumburg. And so some amazing people. If you're in the Chicagoland area, go look them up. But they just made it easy. I just walk in, on my way back from work or wherever, and I'd pick up some roaches, and it was great. I hate crickets with a burning passion. I hate crickets, and they piss my wife off because I guess I'm going to lose one. I guarantee it. And it's always going to be a male that chirps.
Oh yeah.
So just, just the law. So roaches are fantastic. Other than that, people freak out with roaches. I'd gut load them and throw them to my lizards. When I moved up to the suburbs, now I got to drive, 20, 30 minutes out of my way. There's some awesome stores around me, but it's not the easy convenience. And so I tried to breed them for a little bit, but then, the first one that got out, they're not escape proof. It wasn't going to do anything, wasn't going to infest my house. But the first one, they got out, and I remember we actually had new insulation put in down in our basement. I kept them in our basement, and I totally forgot that I even had them, down there. I mean, I didn't forget I had them, but I forgot to warn anybody that would walk into the basement. And they had to move. We didn't have much in the basement at the time, but they had to move some stuff. And I had lost one, and it was a big adult, male. And the worker screamed. Like, this is like a 6'5" moving stuff construction guy, and oh my god, it was just like, just there's the biggest damn roach I've ever seen. Yeah, so that was short lived. So I had to look for a species that I could still use the feeders. Obviously, I still feed crickets to my geckos once a week, but it's once a week. I gut load them, I throw them in, I'm done. And I tend to buy, mostly my adults don't love the crickets as much with the gargoyles. It's usually the grow outs that really go nuts for them. So I buy smaller crickets that aren't at that maturity level to make noise. Put it that way.
Okay.
So
that's weird. I've had gargoyles in the past, and kind of like you, where I noticed that once they start putting on that size, I don't want crickets anymore.
Yep. They want. I was just talking about this, where they want larger prey, right?
Yeah.
As they get older. So the big roaches, and I can tongue feed the big roaches. I don't have to worry about it then, which is awesome. Yeah. I love watching that crunch. Right. And then I don't do this very often, but I will feed my breeding females once a year, either a pinky or a fuzzy if they're big enough. And I really think that helps them in the breeding season.
Do they take it? Like, do you have any issues feeding them, or?
Depends on the individual. I've got one that'll take anything. I'm like, after she went after the fuzzy as quickly as she did, I was like, do I have to worry about my finger? Because that's about the same size. And she's been a sweetheart, so I don't have to really
people worry. I don't breed them, but I keep just about every species from New Caledonia personally to study just the evolution of all of them, really, the adaptations to the archipelago. I really think that there's more to these group of lizards than most people believe. And I've watched them a lot, man. And gargoyles are absolutely predators, man. There is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. And there's no shame in my game. I have fed them live lizards. I have watched them hunt. I have watched and studied their body movement, their teeth. Their teeth are designed to hold live prey.
Yeah. They're coned.
The way they'll flip a lizard around and pierce its lungs and puncture its heart on the side and flip it like an alligator and choke the thing down. I mean, there's no mistake that this is what they're supposed to eat, man. I mean, it's pretty clear to me, but I've never fed rodents, but I've been curious to how they would.
Yeah, it's not great for, again, if I was feeding them once a month or more, I think it would be detrimental to their health. But the fats and the calcium that they get from the bones, especially, that's why I was recommended not to feed pinkies and to feed fuzzies, small fuzzies, if possible, because they have the bone structure and the extra calcium. So, they're definitely predators. I mean, again, if they are younger, they'll go after each other's tails because they're protein hungry, right? Anything that moves. They're really cannibalistic up into the point where they're ready to breed. And even then, they'll still take some tails every so often. But I just think it's I've heard people feeding other lizards. I know that's taboo in the industry as of right now. But you know what? What's the difference between a pinky mouse for a snake versus maybe it's a morning gecko or something that's age specific. I think anything you keep rats as pets, and they're as smart as dogs, but I think it's whatever you can stomach. But to me, it's about the health of the animal. It's about,
Absolutely.
what is
Absolutely.
best for that animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's hell, we can't even get human diet right. Like, what's a proper human diet, let
Mm-hmm.
alone a gecko diet? So, I think it's always room for discussion and debate. But as long as you are, leaning into your ethics and feeling good about yourself afterwards, and keeping the animal healthy, good on you then.
Absolutely, man. I often wonder too if they're predating on birds in the wild. If they're raiding nests or eating
Hmm.
chicks or something. I mean, it's
I've
just
heard that
if
actually.
you watch them and they're obviously climbers. They obviously climbing trees. They're obviously it just doesn't seem like they're I mean, I guess maybe larger flying bugs, but there's a lot of unknown about these things, man, about these gargoyles, dude. And I think that's part of the allure to them, man. I mean, for any real enthusiast,
Yeah.
it's all the
Well, like you said,
unknowns that
any of
attract them.
the new cow species, we think we know everything, and I know it's a cliche to say this, but it's just so true. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know anything, and that
Absolutely.
doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You use the best information you have at the time, and you always keep your mind open to learning. That's why we talk on podcasts like this, is to share information. Just me
Exactly.
doing my podcast, I've learned so much in the last year. Like, if you would have, kind of recap my year, it almost looks like I'm being selfish doing this, right? Because I'm
Mm.
gaining so much from everybody who says yes to coming on, right?
Yep.
I am giving no information out to people. I'm just absorbing it and then sharing that with others. So it's
Say
great.
it all the time. I've learned so much more than I could ever imagine teaching anybody. And I've been keeping
Hmm.
reptiles for 40 years. I've learned more in the last year than 40 years.
Right. And here's the thing is, I've had people tell me they think that, I've been doing this for what, 3 years? I know people, and I've had people on that are a decade longer working with these gargoyle geckos. I am not the buck stop, piece of information, right? There are people with way more information than me. I'm not the expert. It's funny hearing people go, "Oh yeah, Bobby, he's the gargoyle expert." Guys, I'm not. I am learning alongside with you guys. So, do I have information? Absolutely, and I'm willing to share what I have. But I am not the textbook on what these animals are. I'm just one of those guys that goes such deep down a rabbit hole when I like something that you tend to learn things by asking questions, and so that's what I do.
Yep. And so you brought up the podcast, right? So was your inspiration just to to get as much knowledge as you can for the guards, or did you have any other inspirations towards doing a podcast?
So I think it was more of I was looking at ways to, like, just contribute back to YouTube, right? I'm a big consumer when it comes to YouTube. Even today, I watch your podcast every episode, and
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
it's
Thank you.
oh yeah, no, I mean, if it's interesting and fun, I'll keep watching. If it's not, I don't. It's like the algorithm. But it's one of those things where you guys are doing a great job, and there's some episodes I'm more interested in than others. But at the end of the day, I wanted to find a way to kind of jump on and see what it's all about on the other end, right? I was just curious. And when I saw, I started off actually kind of imitating, because I was just so excited about my gargoyles. I wanted to show them off and show them off in a different way. And when I started with gargoyles, I was completely Facebook, right?
Mm.
And you know how great Facebook is all the time. Wink, wink. Right.
I
So
just
I
got
was
kicked
never
off a
on
bunch of groups,
Instagram.
so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I was never on Instagram yet, and now I think Instagram's uh, it's a lot easier to share stuff and not get the negativity. I'll put it
Mm.
that way. So
Yeah.
YouTube was my place that I started with, and my first few videos were not great editing wise or anything else. I literally had a light box, and I tried to do the Sosic reptiles where I walked the geckos in my hand and talked over it and stuff. And start wherever you are comfortable with. Start there and just share your stuff, and I think you're gonna find that it's pretty fun. It gets addictive, right? Because not that I'm chasing views. If I don't have something to post, I don't post. I haven't posted a video in probably 3 weeks,
Mm.
and I know I get people reaching out to me. When's the next video coming up? it'll come out when I have something. I'd rather maybe be a guest on a few different places, right? Because again, this is just a process for me. My other inspiration was, and I've said this a ton of times, but the Gecko Pod. I'm actually, as much as I love being on this right now, they're having a live, so I'm a little bit bummed I don't get to watch that too, right? So I'm a fan
Everything's
as
on
much as
Thursday
I'm
right
a
now.
creator. Everything's on Thursday. Yeah, people want their Fridays, so. But it's okay. But they were a big inspiration. I think what they, everybody steals ideas from everybody else and recreates. And if anybody takes any of my ideas and goes with it or copies it or mimics it and makes it their own, I'm flattered, right? And so I wanted to see more gargoyle focused content because they do a great job with the crested gecko stuff. The way they're diving into genetics, they bring on tons of guests, and now they're kind of pivoting from some of their guests and doing some lives and Q&As. I think it's great because they have so much information, just the two of them. It's funny. I was watching one of their episodes where they're like, the episodes where it's just AJ and Harry don't do well as well as some of the guest videos. And I'm laughing because I'm like, my favorite videos they did were the first few where they went over breeding and the market and care. I'm like, I watched those 4 or 5 times each, right? And so I wanted to have that information, but for gargoyle geckos. And because I didn't see it, I saw it as an opportunity to kind of fill that niche.
You will. You will. Bobby, I mean, I'm
Thank you.
sure you know, dude, I was probably your first or second follower, bro, when you
You
started.
were.
I've watched you go from nothing and knew the second I saw you, I was like, this kid is going to be the Gargoyle Gecko Pod. Mark my words. The niche was there to be filled, and I've watched it sound so crazy, but it's like I've watched a tree grow, man. And it's from your first couple animals to vending to the podcast. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to watch. I mean, it's inspirational in itself. You probably inspired so many people
I
that you
appreciate
don't
that.
know about. I mean, it's I talk about you all the time, man. You do a great job, man. Your personality. You're a very gifted person with this. You will be very big in this.
You're gonna make me blush. I appreciate it, man.
The truth,
And what's
man.
crazy is it sounds like I've been doing this for years. I've been on YouTube for a year. My biggest video ever that I put out was the Schaumburg NARBC 2023. That was when I believe I really started my YouTube journey because I hadn't even started the podcast at that point, right? And so, how much we've done in just 1 year, um, I'm just blessed. I'm blessed that people like it enough to tune in when I do post, and that you stick with me through my sporadic, schedule. Right? I don't post every Tuesday, or every, whatever. So many, and people still come and enjoy it and comment. And you've been there, like you said, from the very beginning. And I appreciate all your comments and support. And I'm just honored to be invited onto your podcast as well. So thank you guys.
It's gonna, you're gonna, again, you're doing what you're doing, but it's a perfect storm, if you will. As crested geckos got super, super popular and everybody's doing something with them, a huge bunch of people started to say, okay, well, they're all pretty much taken care of. Let me go this route. Now, more people are getting gargs and into gargs, and there wasn't much content about gargs. You have literally made yourself the garg guy, dude. It's super cool, man. I mean, and you're
That I'm even in the
you
same
say you don't
breath as
post.
David from Tiki's is, people will bring us up together and I'm like, he is
Yeah.
so much more knowledgeable, so much, his content is phenomenal. I binge it like crazy, but I'm just always, I'm very humbled by you guys, by anybody who's a fan. I'm not searching for fame. I just want to highlight when I first got into this, guys, going back to Curious Creatures, right? They had crested geckos and they had gargoyles. And I'll admit something. I thought crested geckos were cooler. Okay? I thought the way they looked were gorgeous, and they are gorgeous animals, right? And I was like, when I saw the gargoyles, especially the lower color, lower saturation, now what we'd maybe call a pet quality gecko, they're not flashy, especially as babies, right? They're cool in my opinion,
I
but
love.
I didn't really. But my thing is that I found love for them because when I saw my very first red super blotch, that's a different animal. That's a completely different animal. That's like saying my Honda Civic's the same as my Ferrari. Like, you know what I mean? And so maybe I thought I wasn't a car guy because all I saw was Honda Civics, right? But you see the first Bugatti, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, now we're talking, guys.
Oh,
And it just is blossomed from there. And I think that with gargoyles, the future is bright because we know so little about their genetics. The amount people don't even understand the 3 different phenotypes that we have. We don't have any morphs that are fleshed out. It's not a single one. And so it's the Wild West right now, even with naming,
yeah.
like, oh, this is a super blotch. Yeah, maybe it's a super blotch. It's up to you. I'm not going to be the name police, but it's one of those things where I think once, just like with crested geckos, some morphs start coming out and some we get more publicity on these animals. They've been around longer. There's more genetic diversity because they've been in the United States for a lot longer than crested geckos.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's only a matter of time before these really have their heyday.
Absolutely. What's your end game? What do you plan on? What's your master plan? Like,
Well, I want to buy an island off of New Caledonia with gecko money. No, I'm kidding. So just retire there, right? Surrounded by the animals I love. No, my goal is to just hopefully have the same passion I have today in 5 years. I don't care about the money. I don't care. I mean, I don't want to go poor, so I want to at least break even. But this is a fun hobby for me. This is my stress reliever, right? This is what I do to connect with new people.
mm-hmm.
So my goal is I want to still be in the hobby in 5 years. I want to open my geckos enclosure, giving them the best life possible, producing some absolute heat, and still enjoy it as much as I do today in 5 years. That's my goal.
You will.
Yep.
It may not be easy for you to see. You may wonder, but for someone from the outside looking in, I guess it's easy to see that you will. Just that you
Thank
don't
you.
care about the money, and your passion is the animals and the progression of them, and how you feel about the hobby and the way you contribute to the hobby and what you take from the hobby or the community. You will be one of the people that are here in the long run.
I appreciate that.
That's
Because it's not my personality. I love change.
Yeah.
Ask my wife. I'll rearrange the living room and annoy the crap out of her. It's like, why? I don't know. I just, it's getting
I
stale.
just felt like it.
Right, exactly. I had an extra hour. I joke because it's like, I speaking of cars, like I had different. I swapped this one in, get this one. Until my recent car, my wife goes, "You're going to keep that for 10 years." Like that was a commitment for me, and so, I could go through it. We talked kind of my origin story, right? And I always have to give an abridged version because I have gone through, just like many people in this hobby, many different iterations of the pet hobby, right? Where you can only keep so much. Okay, I went through the fish phase. I went through this phase. I went through that phase. And I had these animals, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for the first time in my life, I have a species that I see lasting a long time. And a lot of it has to do with, like you gave me credit for, and I appreciate it, what I'm putting back into the hobby, right? That it's not just me going to a fish store, buying a bunch of cool looking fish, having them in my tank, cleaning it once a week. And then I'm like, 2 to 10 months from now, discus are cool, but I kind of want, African cichlids. Or this bearded dragon's cool. I've had them for 5 years. I kind of want collared lizards. It's like you're always tinkering. And that's what I love about this hobby is I always am tinkering, right? I'm looking for new breeding stock. Maybe when I can't do that, I'm looking to upgrade their enclosure. When I have their enclosure, maybe I want new substrate that I need to look into, right? How can I make it better? There's 1,001 little things you can tinker with. And if you get into the breeding side of things, okay, I've got to wait 3 years for this gecko to grow out, right?
Sure
So
do.
Then even after 3 years, the first year is a throwaway year for most part, right? Not always. Some of them are just right off the bat, but a lot of them, maybe you get 2 eggs, maybe you get 1 egg, maybe you get 0 eggs so far. So it just keeps you going because there's always something to improve and work on. But as long as you have a vision, right? You don't want to do that blindly. But if you put the animals' welfare first and you have fun making their lives better, this hobby can be a longer lasting hobby.
So
You guys
Is
hear
that
that?
your stomach or a frog?
yeah, I heard.
Giant bullfrog.
I was
I
gonna
was
say
wondering
that's a frog.
This big. He's huge.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh man, I was like, what happened? Are
that's
you
great.
hungry, Aunt? Damn.
I know he hears it. He does it all the time. I don't know what makes him do it, but he like only does it at a certain time.
He's telling you to upgrade his enclosure now.
I'm building him one. I'm building him
There you go.
Yeah.
Tinker over here. So okay, let me ask. So with the bullfrog, is that an American bullfrog or an African?
African bullfrog.
Ah, you got the pixie. Okay, cool. I saw
Yeah, you got
for the
the
first time
big
I saw
boy.
a baby pixie at the show, and they are so cute. And
Tiniest thing.
someone was, oh, they're so tiny. And I had to tell everybody. So my son, he's 5, and he loves. If you guys know what Wild Kratts is,
What is it?
Wild Kratts. It's a PBS show. Remember
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Zaboomafoo back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it's 2 biologist brothers, and they make animal content for kids. And my son's obsessed. And as someone who's obsessed with animals, it makes me so proud. He
Right.
goes around telling people facts about how, those pixie frogs, they protect their kids until they get to a certain age, and then they have to get away. Otherwise, he'll eat them. And they're like, Dad, you're not going to eat me, right? I'm like, well, you're going to clean your room?
That's awesome.
So, it's great.
That's cool.
But, yeah.
So
It's got to
so
be a proud
you
moment, man. Did they come? They came to
Oh,
the
yeah.
show, right? They come and watch you vend.
You know what? They didn't. Nelson had his kids there. My kids, they're a little bit younger, and so it's a little bit. Even though I live close, they get bored easily, and so they've been to shows. I've taken them to shows, but that's usually because I can take them out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I wanted to just do this. They'll definitely be a big part of it. They're a big part of, even my 2.5-year-old. He loves coming into the gecko room, right? They got a stuffed animal gecko, and they help me spray, and it's fun. Even my 2.5-year-old, who'll go, no, spray the gecko directly, and I'm like, yes, good. Okay, you don't put the hose on the gecko and then hit spray. You spray around the gecko, and here's a fun story for you. Speaking of kids, so some of my best babies this season came from my girl Eve in Hawaii, and I had 8 of their eggs in this one, deli cup holder, right? And one day I'm watching him by himself, and I'm downstairs, and he runs upstairs, and I wasn't even thinking he was going to go in my gecko room. He knows, to not open the enclosures, but he got it in his head. He wanted to see the gecko eggs. So he opens up my cooler, which has latches, right? Brings the geckos downstairs to tell me to open them. Now, this is a 2.5-year-old walking down steep stairs. He could have shaken them. He could have dropped them. I thank the Lord that these were okay. I was like, I need to see if these even grow after this point. And then when they hatched, I was like, you know what? Maybe my son should shake all the eggs because these came out fantastic, So little things like that. But now there's a gate that he can't get through to get to my gecko room without me. But he knows, don't touch daddy's gecko eggs,
Did you have reptiles? Were you exposed to reptiles at all when you were their age? When you were anywhere like 2 to 5 years old? Did you ever have any exposure to animals?
Just wild. Again, my family was, unfortunately one of those mindsets where, the only good snake's a dead snake, kind of thing. I lived in Texas for a little bit. I don't remember it, but, I just definitely afraid of rattlesnakes. So you got to expose the next generation.
Absolutely.
Even
why I do this.
Right.
My biggest passion. Like, your kids are going to be the coolest kids in school when they like, you don't even know what you're doing to them. Could you imagine being you at their age and your dad doing this for you? Like, you're a superhero, man.
It was cool after the show. So I got my tub of geckos, right? I'm done with the show on Sunday. And when I went over to so basically my son, the reason why he didn't come on Sunday, I was going to actually have him come. His best friend who they've been friends since they're like, I'm not kidding, 6 months old, right, at daycare. It's cool. Usually kids don't make friends like that. And so we get invited over to his birthday party. I can't make it because I'm vending. But then the party ran long, and our two boys were just hanging out. So he went and he's like, Daddy, can you bring your geckos? Because his buddy wanted to for his birthday, he wanted a gecko show, right? So I asked the parents, they were cool with it. So I did an impromptu gecko show, right? Luckily, I had some adults with me that I just brought for fun. And the kids love it. All of his friends know that if they come to my house, it's a menagerie. I got a saltwater tank, I got dogs, I got cats, I got geckos. So it's good
So
stuff.
cool, man.
Yeah.
So good for
So
them too, man. I mean, to learn these things, they're learning adult hobbies, if you will, at such a young age. I mean, I can only imagine what that does for brain development and just life in general. Life skills from these learning responsibility and how to follow rules, if you will, and it's just so much to it, man. I mean, there's it's very
Yep.
cool for them, dude. You're doing a good.
Well, it's like, and a lot of people, maybe you don't have kids, right? People watching, but a lot of people, when they're in their 20s or something, will have at least a dog or something, unless you just don't like animals, which is fine. But you wouldn't be watching this podcast. So I was a dog trainer for years, right? And the when you have a puppy, what do? You expose them to as many things in a safe, positive way to desensitize them so that they're not fearful, right? And so that they can
Absolutely.
handle new, novel things. And a lot of people, I'm not saying kids are dogs or dogs are kids, but I am saying that, the intelligence of my Australian Shepherd is about a 5-year-old. So, it's one of those things where you have to bring your kids and expose them to new and novel things so that they don't just sit on their tablet, so they don't just eat chicken nuggets, whether it's their palate or their behavior. We
You
want
got it.
to help them, love the next generation. It's gonna just blossom into, we talk about, U.S. ARC and things like that, who are going to protect our rights to, have these amazing animals. Those are people who were exposed and found the love and the joy, right? They didn't just pop out of nowhere. So
yeah,
that's
Absolutely.
our
You hit the
job.
nail on the head. At least you know what you're doing, man. It's not even. It's
Yeah, I don't clicker train them though. I will say that. The biggest difference between dogs and kids, you can't clicker train them. Well, you can. It's
I'm
frowned
about to
upon,
say
and you
you
don't put them
might
in
be.
crates. Yeah,
definitely
That's
doesn't.
you
Harry
ever see the Big
Potter.
Bang Theory where Sheldon goes and gives a chocolate to Penny every single time she does something right? A little positive reinforcement there. But
There you go.
yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
So do have a question in the chat.
Absolutely.
So Matt, he said he
Oh
got to
yeah.
meet you at NERBC. Definitely, he said you're a cool
Yay!
person.
Thank you for saying that.
He did ask, do you work with anything else besides gargoyles right now?
Not at the moment. Obviously, like I said, I've had different reptiles.
Yeah,
I
you're a
think.
Dactylodes, don't you?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I forget about that one. Yeah, actually,
More
so
about
I don't
your
know if you can
collection.
see it. You see that right there? So I traded one of my baby gargoyle geckos for this fully set up bioactive, and I love it. I
Which
had bioactive when
Eurodactyloides
I
is it?
first started. It's the occidentalis. I was actually
Okay.
trying to sell it just to buy more gargoyles, but now that I don't need to, it's staying here because they are so cool. They're so underrated. I really want to get into the Velarde. They're coming out. I think I don't know who. I got to look it up, but someone already created a melanistic version.
Yeah.
And then some of my friends that were at the show at Schaumburg, they're working on some high color pattern ones. And I think, talk about another sleeper species. These are smaller, they're easier to handle, they're always out. Like, I can see her just perching on places all the time. You can cohab them easier, they're less aggressive, they take less food. They're really one of the best pets. Like if I want to hand them to a kid that knows not to squeeze, right, and not going to freak out, I'll let my 5-year-old handle this gecko. It's so easy. They don't jump nearly as much. So I think they're a great species. That's once there's more variation to them, I think people are gonna really see the value there. I think the only downside is that they just all sort of look the same right now. So
Yeah.
You ever experienced them spray the stuff out of their tail, the whatever?
nope, but I don't want to.
Uh,
I
It
was
smells
warned
like a
about this
stink bomb.
girl. Does it? Oh,
Yeah,
like a
well, at
stink
least
bug
my
or stink bomb?
Stropharis bomb.
Oh,
It smells
okay.
like a stink bomb. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
my
because they do
Stropharis
those
do the
that
same
too,
thing.
which I think is so cool.
Yeah.
So, what do you have to do to get them to spray you?
I don't know.
Uh,
I don't doing it, but I don't know.
Mine only spray me once they hatch out the egg. After that, they just like, whatever. It's just a big person feeding me. That's all.
So this is the second time I've had Urdactyloides. I've never had the Stropharis, but yeah, well, the person I got this girl from, he warned me that she sprayed them when putting them in, the deli cup. So I'm like, oh man, I've never been sprayed before. I might be a little bit nervous here. That's gorgeous. What locale is that?
This is a Stropharis. This is a Ciliaris. So they do the little spraying
Ciliaris.
too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gorgeous. I love the oranges on those things. Their color is really blowing up too with the selective breeding. But back to the Uris. When I first started, actually, so I knew I had to make this at least net neutral, right, money wise. I can't spend $2,000 on an investment gecko. It's just not going on the credit card. So anything I buy, it's completely paid for in cash, and that's just my rule. But with that being said, I knew that if I bought baby gargs, which I did, that I wasn't going to see a return on it for years, and I was fine with that. But I was, looking at Yuri's, and I saw a already mated, proven pair, and I picked it up for $400, right? And it was a agricoli, so the most common, cheapest one, but still pretty fantastic. And they were great. They were phenomenal pets. I called it Kermit and Miss Piggy, and and they bred right away. Like day one, I put them into their enclosure. It was the first time I saw a gecko hook up. It's the first time. And then I called the breeder. I'm like, his heavy peens aren't going back in. She goes, is he licking them? I go, yep. Just give it a little bit, it'll be fine. And they did. Everything was fine. But I was freaking out because I'd never seen it before. And so, but they produced right away for me. I probably had about 6-7 clutches that year from them. And the only reason why I stopped breeding them and actually traded them for some gargoyles, so some ones that I'm actually breeding now, so it was a good investment, was because the babies with the agricoli, the market's about $120 on them, right? The babies.
Really?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not a
That's
huge, and again, it's not about the money, but if I got a whole bunch of babies and you got to wait 4 or 5 months to grow them out, and then I was shipping things, and shipping costs $60 or $70, or if you're shipping to California, for me, it's close to $100. Nobody's going to pay $100 for an animal and then $100 for shipping. Well, they will, but it's a lot harder to sell. So that's why I said if I get back into them, which sort of am, I don't know if I'm a breeder. She might just be a cool pet. The Ostentalis hold their value a little bit more, and the females go for around $600.
Very cool.
Males a little bit cheaper.
Very
So,
cool.
So,
What projects do you?
go ahead, Ant.
well, I'm sorry, you cut off there.
Is Jason frozen?
I think he is. So
What's your passion project, if you will, with these gargs? What exactly are you trying to? And I don't mean it in a rude way, but what are you trying to contribute to the hobby with your collection? What are you trying to?
It popped out yesterday. Did you see the post?
I saw. Beautiful.
Oh, I got it right here. You want to see it?
Absolutely.
Look at this, Jeff. Okay. So I just want to produce super thick lateral, high coverage, high color animals, and I love the red on red. Right?
Yeah.
People either love it or hate it. This baby popped out. This is 24 hours old. Okay, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but look at the saturation on that and how dark. Now, usually it's bright yellow and orange stripe in the center when they first hatch out. This is red and orange. This thing is insane, and I absolutely love it.
And that orange will eventually turn red.
This will turn red, yeah, 110%. So I can show you the clutch mate, which is not as deep and it's more traditional, but it was sort of still in sheds. Let me check it real quick. Yeah. So, it's more like yellow.
Yeah.
So you can see how orange the other one was. And this one's phenomenal too. So, that's stage one, is just getting some really high quality stuff going. And, I'm only in year 2 of producing, but I bought the best I could afford and the best I could get my hands on.
Absolutely.
And I'm not rich, and I'm not one to go into debt for it. So I was just very strategic with it, very selective. To anybody I reached out to buy a gecko and I didn't buy one from you, I apologize. But, one of those things where so many people have so many great animals.
Yeah.
But when you need to be picky, that's why I don't get hung up when people don't buy from me and they reach out and ask me for
You're
10
entitled
pictures.
to that, man. It's a huge community. A lot of great animals are being produced. If you have a goal in mind, you would be a fool to not shop around and look for the animal that best fits your goals. You should. A good breeder will want that for you, man. Who wouldn't?
And right now, because there's no morphs or anything, it's just, I've got blotches, high end blotches, and I got high end stripes right now. And I just want to make better versions of everything and keep progressing that. But I also don't want to do that at the cost of, I don't think a lot of garg people, like crescent people right now, have to worry about structure a lot, right? You look at the Dalmatians. I love the Dalmatians, but a Dalmatian with good head structure is rare.
It's a
right? And that's just because of the limited gene pool, because everybody wants the super paper white base. Whereas with gargoyles, I feel like it's not a conversation yet, maybe because it's got a little bit deeper gene pool. But I've noticed that some of the really high color stuff that I like has a little bit shorter of a snout sometimes. Sometimes the horns aren't as pronounced. Sometimes they don't grow to 60 grams. They'll cap out at 45, 50 grams. I'm noticing not my animals, but some people I've talked to. So, I think, when you selectively breed for one trait, you don't necessarily know what other traits you're messing with. And if all you're doing is breeding for color, you need to make sure that you're also keeping the animal healthy. And that's where I picked up an F1. I think that's one of those things that, I was talking to Nelson at NCG. He's really big into this too, where he's awesome. Yeah. Just vended with him. But talking about F1s, right? If you don't know what an F1 is, just for everybody, you've got the wild parents, right? And then once they breed in captivity, that first generation is an F1. You take an F1, you breed those together, you get an F2, and so on and so forth. But those typically have more of the pure wild genetics. And because these animals live for so long, we have wild pairs. Now, not for sale very often, but people are still producing wild animals. And so I picked up an F1 female just because I want to inject that into my lines to make sure that these animals are staying true to their natural form, right? I want that longer snout. I want the bigger bodies. I want the horns on top of having the color and the wow and the everything else. So I'm very greedy and I want it all.
You do find those F1s to be structurally different than a lot of the other species? I mean, can you look at yours and say, well,
yes and no. So yes, compared to some of the animals, right? But I mean, the girl who produced this, Bimini. So I got her from Firehouse Geckos LLC. I don't know. This wasn't even a conversation of a F1 or wild genes. I know the parents of it, but I don't know how close they are to the wild. Yeah. But I'll tell you this, the structure on that girl is insane. And both I have her and her half sister Exuma, right? So Bimini and Exuma are half siblings. They have the same dad, different moms. And both of them within a year were 65 grams. And both of them, their horns, their structure is impeccable. Like textbook. You look at some of these, and I compare it to so at Tinley last year, I got my girl, she's got 402 exotic genetics, so they own the wild group, the Yate region group,
really,
and produced some really cool ones. So they're at Tinley every year, And go look at their table next time you go. And like some of their males, especially, are monsters. Like some of them, you can tell, like, yeah, there's something going on here where it's a different breed. So, yeah.
I've seen Nelson's. Nelson's F1 is like a dragon, dude. This thing has horns.
Oh yeah,
monster. He has a monster.
Well, and everybody thinks that, and again, if you go pick up two, really low expression, really low quality, geckos, don't expect to go and pump out a Deadpool baby. Okay. Yeah. But I will tell you this. The amount of generations it takes to create color, go back and ask people for their lineage. Go back and look at some of these great breeders' websites that publicly post their animal, their holdback, the parents that produced them, the grandparents, and potentially the great-grandparents with some breeders. And I put out as much information as I can gather when I buy. But you look at the great-grandparents or even just the grandparents, and it's like, these animals were not that amazing, right? Because I don't think we understand their genetics. Yeah. I think that we're just scratching the surface. And with every generation that we're producing, stacking these genes onto each other, it's kind of cool what we're able to produce in a relatively short amount of time. If these guys produced like other animals, like leopard geckos, I could only imagine what we'd be at right now.
Imagine an all black one, melanistic garg or something. Like
everybody wants that, the black dragon
with red eyes or blue eyes. Whoa.
So at Schaumburg, they had a melanistic Chewy.
Yeah.
That was pretty sweet. Yeah, so again, we got the melanistic Chewy, we got the Yuri. It's awesome.
You saw it?
Yeah.
See it?
Oh yeah, I held it. So
that's my favorite species, hands down. Without
how much was he asking for?
Man. Oh.
Yeah. One wasn't for sale. The older one, I think it was in the thousands. Let's just put it that way. I don't know if he wants me to say it out loud, but
it was out there for
it's
public,
not going to be cheap.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. I mean, the baby was $5,000.
Okay. Oh, really? That's not that bad, honestly. To get
that's not bad for a Chewy.
To get into a project, exactly when you get a white collar.
I thought it was. I could be wrong. Maybe it was 15, and I didn't see the one.
It was cheaper at Tinley. If it was at 5,000, at Tinley, I couldn't. I think it was over $1,000 when I saw him at Tinley. I was like this close to buying one, but I think
he was still proving it out. But I'm guessing.
Yeah, he was. He was still trying. He was trying to prove out the super form. So I don't know if he's proven out that one yet, which that would be good too.
Yeah.
So, you were vending this past weekend,
they're
right?
cool. I mean, because when you look at it, everybody, when you think of melanistic, don't think of a black dragon, right? Where it's 100% pitch black.
Yeah. It still has
are very complex patterns, right? And so melanistic just means high melanin, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at lychees, right? Look at the melanistic lychees. That's going to give you a good example of what we're talking about here. Or I believe it's actually in, I'm going to shout out JP Lizard's World. He just had a great walkthrough of Schaumburg, and go check that out. He's got it in there for display right now. It's live.
Definitely going to check.
Yeah, it's great. So, and then same thing with the Uris. The Uris, I think, have more of a solid kind of look to them, right? Because they're just all green with a little bit of yellow in places. Where that was really cool seeing pictures of those because they were a little bit darker. But I think it's gonna be the same thing with gargoyles. If we can find a melanistic gene, that'd be awesome.
But don't you already have like
and we're not gonna paint them with a marker either.
Yeah, isn't there already an A-male?
I don't know what I have. So potentially A-male, leucistic. They don't know what it is, and I don't really care, which is fun. So if I have it, I have it. And so basically, I've got a gecko that I got from Eclipse Exotics. Them, Rack House, and Tiki's all have visual something's going on there. I don't know what they want to call it. They can name it. It's
they
their
definitely do. There's something.
Yeah. So White Boy and then Vanilla Ice. So is what David called his. So I think they're all, I don't know if they're working together or not. They probably should, in my opinion, but that's not my that's not my bag. But I think a lot of them say they're pretty close figuring out. I just know that I have a female from the pair that produced Eclipse Exotics melanistic visual. So if it's a recessive trait, which I'm kind of hoping for, then I've got a 100% het. If it's a co-dominant trait where only the super form is white, if say white boy is a super form of a codom, then I have a single codom, and that'll be pretty fantastic. But again, it's all speculation until they come out with something. I'm not going to say I know what it is and pretend that I'm smarter than I am, because all I have is a pretty red gecko. So, but when she fires down, she is paper white. Like, she is gorgeous. I could get her out if you want. So
cool. What
yeah.
do you still have?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I put her up for sale earlier this year. It was stupid, but there was this one male, I won't talk about it too long, that I just thought the way my direction was going, that would have been a better choice for me. But I'm glad it didn't sell. See, you know, things happen for a reason, and I know it's again cliche, but you know, I really hadn't hatched this year's babies out. I hatched last year's babies out. I was a little underwhelmed, but I paired her, you know, actually to the same male I have her paired to now. But for some reason, the genetics just didn't hit like they're hitting this year. And so that's a lesson that I learned, is that just because one clutch isn't what you're expecting doesn't mean the next clutch isn't. You know, and just because the first clutch is phenomenal, don't expect every clutch to be phenomenal. And that's actually what's kind of cool about gargoyles, is that unlike, you know, some of the other more prolific and consistent animals, now there's some pairs that are consistent, don't get me wrong, it's not, you're not printing money, guys, okay? And that's why the value stays a little bit higher for high quality gargoyle geckos, is that, you know, it takes more effort, it takes more time. And I think that's a cool aspect to this hobby that'll keep it going.
What's I don't know how to put this question, but
sure.
I listened to David one time. He was talking to Paul Murlock about gargs, and they were talking about male makers, right?
Yes, I watched that episode.
What do you know about this? You know,
so I know a lot of people who fully buy into it. You know, it's one of those things where if you talk to a lot of breeders, it's hard to make males, right?
I see this
high quality males. Yeah.
Huh.
So again, I've made plenty of males too.
Really?
So I think it's interesting. I don't know if my male Raffles was a male maker himself, but I would say 60-70% of the babies came out male. Okay.
Really?
So it wasn't that 100%. I know I've talked to Gecko Monster, and he's got, you know, a tiki line, you know, pair that makes nearly 100% males.
Really?
Like he'll stake almost everything on it, you know, and he's got more data points than I do. He's been doing this a little longer, so I don't know enough to say whether it's you know, true or not. But when Paul says something like that, Paul's been doing this a hell of a lot longer than all of us, you know. And all I can do is ask questions. I think it's a great question to ask. The question that came up when I was talking to Gecko Monster, right, was, do male makers make male makers, right? So let's break that down. If that's the case, we could get, and I think they talked about this on the podcast, into a situation where we're going to have the reverse issue, right, in our selective breeding, especially if the male makers make nice babies, right? So if the males that randomly pop up in the pairs that, you know, throw maybe one male every year or something like that, those are the ones maybe we want to focus on breeding, because if male makers make male makers, then we could run into a pretty big issue. But I don't know if that's even the case. I hope it's not. I hope that male makers make males, and the other males, most of them won't be male makers. But again, I don't have enough data points. I'd have to breed a lot more.
You don't think that it's an incubation thing, huh? You don't think that maybe they're...
I'll find out this year, because I'm incubating at a higher temperature. So that's something that I'm finding interesting, is that, you know, with crested geckos, everybody and their mother will tell you incubate nice, slow and low, like you're doing a brisket, right? So I am not a big believer with gargoyles that you have to go slow, because I did that last year. I listened to everybody. I put that little deli cup up on my counter. It was 71 degrees, maybe 72, and they popped
Takes
out
forever.
super late, right? 90 to 130 days, each one of them, right? And the babies, they weren't small, but they weren't monsters, right? My babies this year, I made an incubator out of a really simple, got a thermostat hooked up. You could go watch the tutorial on my YouTube channel on how I made it, right? Did not cost me a dime. I went and picked it up with the few supplies I had and the stuff I had in my garage. Really stable and has not had any issues. But I incubate at 78 degrees. Okay. I'm not cooking them. They're not at 82, but 78 degrees. I keep it consistent. They go in there. They're perfect. They come out at literally 65 days. Okay, they hatch out.
Sweet.
Almost on the day, give or take 1 or 2 days, right? Like that's when I knew when I was looking for these babies that they were due to hatch, right? And I've got another pair that'll hatch out in about 7 days. And I'm not saying it's the right way to do it. I'm just saying my case of one, right? And these babies, you just saw that baby. That baby was a big baby,
Health.
right? And it had a beautiful big head.
Mhm.
And, I'll find out after I grow these babies out whether structure, their horns, right? Just like crested geckos, if you incubate them a little bit higher, if you were to incubate them, they're going to come out. I don't know. Again, this is what I hear. Tell me if I'm wrong here, guys. You have more
I've done
experience
it
with
both.
crested.
I've done it both.
You know,
My information is completely contradictory to everything everyone else says. I've run them at 68 degrees for 100 days,
yep.
and I've ran them at 79 to 80 degrees, and there's zero yolk in the egg when they hatch.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly believe that
Do you see a difference in the head structure?
sometimes, but I attribute it to
Okay.
the parents and the pairings, not incubation.
Ah, okay.
I genuinely do not believe it has anything to do with the incubation temps. I have geckos
Interesting.
that I've grown over here that have hatched in 66 days at 78 degrees. They have heads bigger than a 2-ounce deli.
Right.
So to me, and I also believe that if they're it's just doesn't make doesn't make sense to me, and that's why I started running the project. I ran them side by
And that's
side,
the
and
thing,
it's I have a small control group, so I don't really have enough data to really make a stink about it. But when someone
Right.
says something, I got enough information and enough hands-on experience to be like, well, I give you a run for your money, man, and give you some flat out data that contradicts what you're saying. It's
Well, and the people who do have the bigger collections, I'm not saying they all do this, but I've talked to quite a few. And why I even decided to do this was one of the people, I won't say who, but I really respect in the hobby. They told me, put them in an incubator, and they're going to come out faster, and they're going to come out bigger. And they, so far, they're not wrong. And so I'm a big believer in listen to people. You
Yeah.
see someone who's successful, who's doing something right, ask questions. Don't ever think a question, and this goes for everything we're going to talk about today. The smartest people are the people who act the dumbest. And what I mean by that is pretend you don't know jack and ask 1,001 questions. And that's my strategy with this is I'm going to ask every question possible and get the best information and aggregate it and use my my college degree thinking skills, right? From whatever they told us we were going to learn there. And I'm going to be a critical thinker and go through it and learn as much as possible. So it's about just being open to diving into something.
We should.
And
we all should. We should all experiment.
Look stupid.
How we learn, even by failing. You went one way last season. You're going a different way this season. You will have a winter to evaluate your findings on both, and you may go another route next year.
Right.
It's listening to people that have sense, listening to people that have zero sense, doing your hands-on work and making your best educated choice with what you have to work with, and your knowledge. I don't really knock or bash. I come off harsh when I say that people, I don't want to say they don't know what they're talking about, but I don't mean it to be so harsh. I just mean that people have their ways, but it's cliche saying, and there's more than one way to skin a cat. right? And
Yep.
it's to each their own, I guess. I hate to say, if you're hatching animals and the yolks are dissolved and they're not deformed, and I mean, what's it matter? I mean, the temperature changes in New
Doesn't.
Caledonia all the time. A gecko, an egg that's laid in early March is going to incubate a lot longer than eggs that are dropped in July.
So I hate to ask you a question on your show, but do you mind if I ask you a question?
Rock out.
So something that gets brought up, I see this a lot, is, and there's pros and cons to this too. So I'm making a statement, but I'm open to hearing both sides. The idea of mimicking the wild, I hear that a lot, right? We have to mimic the wild. And to a degree, I agree with it, right? You need to have parameters that are designed to support the life of an animal that evolved for that specific environment, right? However, I live in Chicago, right? You both live on different ends of the country, right? America's a huge place, right? There's different elevations, there's different humidity, there's all these things. We're in air conditioning, right? And now we're trying to create New Caledonia in a box, right? Whether that's a tub or an exoterra, right? It's near impossible to replicate it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to do the best we can, but there's so many other factors. We could talk about heat. We could talk about incubation, temperatures and things like that. But, when I hear people say, that, well, in there it's this way. Well, yeah, but there's that one factor, but there's 1,000 other factors that we're not getting right or we're not doing. And so, we have to figure out what works as a consistent hobby. The more we grow, right? And look at bearded dragons, right, as an example, right? How we kept bearded dragons, even when I got my very first bearded dragon, is different from today because we're always learning, but we're not keeping them like they're in the desert, right? Like, I don't see many people keeping them and recreating the outback, but they're doing it in a way that's super successful.
Do I sound smug if I said I do?
Do you really? No, I think that's
I
cool
keep them in
too.
full bio, sand, dirt, gravel.
But you're the exception to the rule there, right? Wouldn't you admit that? I'm not saying we shouldn't go your route.
I probably am, I guess, but I'm one of those people that we're probably talking about. I don't want to say keep everything like nature, and I do. I don't want to say fortunately or unfortunately. It's just my preference. But I
Sure.
agree with nature, like you said. These animals evolved into who they are because of a region and an area that they are from. So in theory, they are everything they are because of where they come from. You can't just take that from them. It's to me, I always say just use nature as the proxy, right? Like we have to, instead of saying, well, this keeper does this and this keeper does that, that's great. But like you said, we all live in different places. So what works for you is not going to be the same here, is not going to be the same for Jason in Arizona at 116 degrees. So whatever we do, we have to adjust our individual parameters to nature, right? Like we have to get as close to that as we should rather than as close to what this super uber successful dude in New Jersey's doing. You may not live there. You may not be able to, so it's harder for me to explain than it is to actually think through, but
no, and I think I mean, a lot of people think that way because that's why bioactive is getting so popular, right? Is people are trying to recreate that, right? But what's cool about these geckos, right? And this only goes to an extent, right? Why are these so much more successful than some other species? Why? Because they're more adaptable to the way we keep them than other species. Chameleons would not adapt to us the way that these geckos have, right? Tortoises are ridiculously adaptable. You can't kill them sometimes, and that doesn't mean that it's good to not have them in the correct environment. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that just like people can move out of where we evolved and inhabit most of the earth, right? We're the most adaptable species there is. The species that are more adaptable are easier to bring to the masses in this hobby, right?
Absolutely.
And the ones that aren't those are the ones that you need to be an expert to have this, right? You need to have everything on point in a certain way, and so we should all strive for that, for even the easy, easy animals, right? The ones that are more adaptable. But, I think that's something we need to recognize, is that these animals are a lot more adaptable than some other
Absolutely.
species.
I don't even bash the guys that keep the gargs and the crested geckos in those Korean bins and racks. In all honesty, I look at them sometimes and I'm like, yo, I admire it, man. Like, my
Yeah.
life would be so easy if I could just walk up to 100 drawers and just pull them out, dude. Like, whoa, bow,
Yeah.
bam, that's awesome. I have nothing against them.
know.
I don't bash them at all. I really, really don't. I don't hate anybody in this hobby that keeps anything
Oh, no.
any way. I actually admire, like you're saying, how diverse and adaptable these animals are. Like, it's super interesting that you can take something that really comes from this type of place, and in theory, it'll thrive just as well in a plastic box. Like,
Yeah.
it's if you
With pool noodles. With pool noodles.
you know,
Because you can wipe the shit off easier.
Yep.
No, it's fun.
cool, man.
No, I think it's just it's a fun conversation to have, but yeah,
It's
you
interesting.
got to enjoy it.
One of the great things that's so alluring about these New Caledonian species also is the different ways we can keep them. Being the different ways we can keep them, they're more attractive to more people because you don't have to have any one particular setup, like you said with the chameleons. You get a chameleon, you need a very specific setup to have chameleons. To have these things, you don't. You could live in a desert, you could live on the Northeast, you could live on the West Coast, you could live in a dorm room, you can live in a skyscraper in Manhattan. Anywhere you live,
These will fit in.
keep these New Caledonian species, man, in a million different ways. That's probably a good reason why they are super popular.
And as people aren't getting big McMansion houses and and property prices are skyrocketing, that's why worldwide I think bearded dragons are the third most popular pet, and I think that's being overtaken. I could easily see that being overtaken by New Cal species for that reason, that you can have them pretty much anywhere. And that's one of the reasons why I got into them, not because I could have them anywhere, but because I've got a busy life. I've got little kids. I've got a job. I've got a career. Like, this is what I do for fun, guys. This is not my full-time job. And so I needed something, there, more power to you if you're breeding, bearded dragons. I love bearded dragons, right? But clutches of 20 babies, and I gotta buy crickets, and I gotta get heat on all of them, and I gotta, it's a lot more involved. Now, that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It just means it's not right for me at this time in my life. And I think a lot of people who are going through times where they have other responsibilities, if I had one gecko, how long do you think it would take me to take care of it each time, and how often?
Not long at all.
It depends how you
30 seconds?
Not much.
I mean, you put them in a bioactive enclosure, right?
Feed them
Swap
3
them
days
out
a week.
food, give them some water.
Right.
Boom, done.
Right.
Couple 10 seconds.
It takes no time, Right now I've got 30 geckos, which is not a ton compared to some people in this hobby.
Nice. So.
It takes me, it takes me probably a good 35 minutes if I'm speeding through. No, it's not bad because I'm pretty efficient with it all. But that's an ideal. That's what, if I got to put the kids to bed and I got to take care of the geckos, that's the speed version. But most times it's going to take me an hour and a half. I'm going to put on one of your podcasts and just jam out while I'm doing this. But I'm also going to take some photos of my favorite geckos and handle a few. And, you spend time with the stuff you love.
Yeah.
So.
It's not a job. It's like you said
If it
earlier,
was, I'd
man,
sell 'em.
your happy place, man. And I come into this room, I have a room too, a designated room, and it's like,
yeah,
I'm out of the world. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not doing anything. All I can think about and that's on my mind is these animals and what's going on and who's growing, who's not, who's developing this, who's doing that. It's like it's never work. It's never a hassle. It's never. I mean, cleaning poop is literally brings a smile to my face. Like, it's like, like I don't.
It's like a Dirty Jobs interview where he's like, "Yeah, shit is my life," But even with that, right? You ever see that? I love that show. But even with that, one thing I love about the gargs is speaking of poop. I don't know. Some people don't like this conversation. Is one reason I won't get a leechy is I don't want to get a razor blade to clean poop. You know, I don't want the leaky on the side. I know they're super cool and I love them, but like my gargs, they're little nuggets. They fall straight down. Done. You know, and like the stuff disappears when I got, you know, springtails in there. You know, they're not even bioactive. I just use cocoa fiber and cocoa chunk mixed together, and it holds the humidity. And I've got some, you know, a little bit of leaf litter in a corner and some moss to keep the isopods and stuff like that alive. Most of mine don't even have isopods; they just have springtails, and they keep the fungus down and they keep the poop eaten for the most part. And I'll spot clean every so often,
Right.
but it's a dried up little nugget. Done. You know.
Are you putting lay boxes? I don't remember if you stopped.
No.
You're still using just the enclosures, right? Pile up the back.
I just use the enclosure. I keep most of the enclosure relatively, you know, low.
Pack up.
You know, probably about a half inch at the most, and then I pile up about a 3-4 inch, you know, pile of, and that's again where all the bugs are too. So it works beautifully because I just know exactly where to dig, and
I do this.
I've got a small enough collection where I track every single female and their cycle, and they are relatively consistent. Now, they'll surprise you every once in a while, which will drive you nuts. For 2 weeks, you're digging for eggs because you're like, are you digging yet? Are you digging? And some of them will dig for a week, you know, and they'll fake you out every night, especially if they're a new female. But I don't mind, you know. It takes me 2 seconds to dig a little corner. Oh, no eggs. And then when I do find eggs, I'm all excited. So it's a win-win, you know.
Awesome.
But I love it. It's great.
Do they retain sperm the way like a crested gecko would? Do you pair them and then you get clutches all year without having to repair them?
No. So could they? Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to risk it. If I'm under the philosophy where if you're gonna lay eggs, as long as you're healthy, I want them to be fertile.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
No sense in
like,
putting all that effort and energy into
it's the same amount of calcium depletion, you know?
Absolutely.
So I actually originally I was gonna just keep everything in pairs, right? Because there's less aggression. The aggression really happens with gargoyles, if there's any aggression, in 2 different times. One, when you first pair them, right? Anytime you meet someone new, you have the most tension, right? For good or bad. And then the other time is when the female is done for the season. Like she's just, okay, I've had, you know, 8-10 eggs. She'll be, you can tell, you know, I'll see a little squirmish or something. At that point, I just move the male either to another female, because I rotate my males, or I'll put him in his own enclosure for the rest of the season.
Interesting.
So that's how I find it works best. But I also have one group that actually no, I have 2, but I just separate one. But really, I keep a few in just pairs if I'm not rotating the male. Last year, I just kept them, you know, I only had 3 pairs, and I just kept them together all year. But again, they were all virgin animals. So again, my experience is limited. So I'm just listening to smarter
still
people.
Knowledge, man. It's regardless. Yeah. I mean, you are just as important, and your findings are just as important as anyone else's, man. Have you so you've repaired them halfway through a season? Do you?
Nope.
No. Do you
Every
know
single
that
cycle.
if you had a male, right, and she was paired to a female, and then halfway through the season, they're still together, eggs are hatching, but you don't like what you're seeing, you put her with another male. How long would it take for the new male's genetics for her to start laying eggs from the new male?
I wouldn't do that, just because then you're playing, you know, who's the daddy, right? And I don't want to go on Maury.
You don't think it'd be a significant difference?
I think it depends on the pairing, but how are you going to guarantee that to a buyer, right? So this is just my opinion. I don't know enough about how long they retain sperm. So my theory is that I'm going to pair them at the beginning of the season. I'm gonna ride that pair all season long, because like we said, just because the first clutch doesn't come out fire does not mean the second clutch is not going to come out fire.
Yeah.
My raffles Kalik babies, I call them. Some people refer to them as Raka, right? Because RAKA is the abbreviation I use for just the first 2 letters of each name. They're very consistent, very, very, very consistent. However, I would say that they're not my best pair, as far as producing like that crazy, super thick laterals kind of stuff, except for I got one like that. Number 7 out of 8 babies this year was phenomenal as a keeper, right? And they're all really cool. They all have lipstick. A lot of them have full backs with blotching on the side, if not like weak striping on the side. But again, if I only went off the first 2 clutches, and swapped out the male, I would have missed out on rack of 7. So what I do is last year when I swapped males on a few of them, clearly I cooled them over the winter, right? They didn't lay. And then what I did was I let them, they all laid a pair of duds, basically. They were out of sperm. Now, I've also heard that just because they laid duds doesn't mean it's not, the next set of eggs is not a guarantee that it's not the old male. So I use my best judgment. If I can see at least 1 pair of duds, if not 2, and if the babies look different enough the next time, I'm pretty confident that it's the new male. But I would probably label those a possible, I would be honest with whoever I sold it to if I was guessing.
That's interesting. That's cool.
But they definitely don't retain it as well as crested geckos. Crested geckos, I know you can pair it right, once and you're done for the season.
Stop to it.
Yeah. I what I've heard from other breeders, again, just watching YouTube and talking to them, I would say 3 to 4 sets of eggs is about max you're going to get from a garg.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I thought you.
So,
I guess I don't know what I heard. I guess I heard like 9, 10 clutches, but
no, you can get 9, 10 clutches, but as far as like a fertile egg from one pairing, so if you let them mate and then you joink the male, you'll probably only get fertile eggs for about 3 to 4 clutches, and then you'll start seeing duds.
Interesting.
But again, it's not a science. I'm not 100%. That's just kind of what I hear. I'm not risking it. I just go and I want to make sure that they are fertile every time.
Yeah.
So after they lay, I give them about a little less than a week off, about 5 days, just to recoup, and then I throw that male back in, and then I let them stay there for about a week unless I see them hook up a few times, and then I rotate it to the next one. And my girls, for the most part, are on different schedules by about a week or 2, which is awesome. It'll be a nightmare if I have multiple females all on the same cycle. But then again, I happen to have more males starting next year.
That's cool.
So
nice.
Yeah.
So
I'm
you were just
overworking
vending,
Roslyn this
right?
year.
At Schaumburg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us your
First time.
So
First
what
time
was your
vending
overall
Tell us about.
experience for that one, for your first one? How was it?
Well, again, I've got to give a shout out first off to Nelson from NCG Reptiles. One of the nicest human beings I've ever met. Fantastic family. You go watch his channel. Everybody go after this. Don't go right this second, but after this, go subscribe to his channel. He's phenomenal. I had him on my podcast, and basically what happened was we were just messaging back and forth, and as I do with people, and we both live close to Schaumburg, right, within driving distance. And I'm like, I don't have enough for a full table, but I also would love to try out vending. I know Schaumburg just posted that they're looking for vendors. Would you ever want to split a table? He's like, yeah, actually, I was just talking to my wife, and she said I should probably try it, and blah, blah, blah. And, one thing led to another, and we're messaging back and forth. He got us in. And funny thing enough, he registered us, and then we got accepted, but I didn't find out till he posted it live, and I'm going through. I'm like, oh, we are on the list. Cool, which is awesome. So we were excited. We just coordinated. I got a big banner for the back. He got a retractable one. We both brought our own setups, and it was very harmonious. It was great. We were both playing off of each other. And, totally different vibes on both sides of the table, right? One table, 2 different vibes. But overall, it was all geckos, and it was all fun and very kid-friendly. So I just had to get creative with mine because I spent $100 on the banner. There was a sale with Vistaprint, so that was pretty sweet.
That's not bad.
Nice.
No, not bad at all for an 8-foot banner.
8 foot,
yeah.
by 4.
Awesome.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll take it. Full color, everything. It was great. So, but bought that, and I didn't want to go into the hole too much, where I was worried about selling geckos. I didn't want to have to drop prices just to sell them. And so I went down into my basement, and having other animals too, you collect stuff over the years that you don't use anymore,
Sure
right?
do.
And so for my bearded dragon, I watched Tanner from Serpent Design. I love his videos. I binge them all the time. And basically, I did a build, really awesome build. I had a 6-foot enclosure for my bearded dragon, right? That I got secondhand, really cheap. And I built a custom rock background with ledges. It was all made out of the insulation foam, and dry locked it and learned how to paint it. And so I did all that, and that was a beast and a half. It was awesome. But then when I sold that to buy another gecko, I didn't have that, but I had the leftover foam. I had the leftover, dry lock and paint. And it's been sitting down in my basement for 2-3 years. So I just went down there, and I'm like, what could I make either with wood or something like this? And what I came up with was what you guys see at the display. But yeah,
Go check
basically,
out Bobby's page and Bobby's Instagram, and you'll see the display he built. You don't need $1 billion to vend, man. All you need is a passion, guys. It's be creative, be different, man. Check out what Bobby did, man, and you'll see what he's talking about, how he did this, man. I mean, it's amazing.
I basically made a gecko cove. So basically, I made it look like rocks, right? Did the same thing. And I was the one thing that I just kind of a fun story. If you watch Tanner's video, he gets a brush that a wire brush you put on your drill. And that's how you go about like really carve it into the foam fast and kind of making it random. And that stuff goes everywhere. Like it sticks to you. You need a mask, otherwise you're going to inhale this. It's probably not good for you, So definitely, put on a mask for that. But I remember doing this, and it sucked. The cleanup sucked, and it did again, but it was worth it. I got a lot of, the way I did the enclosure, or not the enclosure, I had a lot of, even some big name people came up and gave me great compliments, and it's not about that, but it just, it does make you feel good when like Reach Out Reptiles, who has a phenomenal display, gives you a compliment.
They are ridiculous. Them and Sacred Geckos. I love Sacred Geckos.
Yeah.
All the tombs and everything is crazy.
Because they're such creative, innovators, and so, to have people notice, and then not even just that, but kids, it kind of, some people said it kind of looked like a elementary school diorama gone on steroids, and I'm like, yeah, well, it drew people in. I covered all of my deli cups with cutouts, so I went and basically took an idea that I got from Carl from South Tex Gex, where he went and covered all of the acrylic enclosures he has with a black acrylic and a hinge. So it keeps the geckos calm and fired up, and they're not under light the entire time. And I love that idea. And I only had maybe less than a dozen geckos to bring, right? Some of them I just brought to show off. Some of them were for sale. But because I had a low quantity of them, I could make individualized little, paper covers, right? I wish I had one here. But basically, I custom made it so it fit perfectly on the top, and I had a little tab, and people had to go and play peekaboo, right, and check out all the geckos underneath. And I stole the idea from the fish hobby. Where, have you guys ever been at a fish swap?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so at a fish convention where you're selling, baby fish, a lot of the African cichlids and some of the other animals that don't show what the adults look like, the babies all just look like little silver fish, right? So no one would buy them knowing what they are. But they have pictures on the bag of what the parents look like, right, to show them.
Cool.
So I put parent pictures on all of the geckos, so you could see this is an Eve baby.
Brilliant.
Eve paired with,
Brilliant.
and you lift it up so you see the parents on the outside, kid on the inside. And They stayed mostly fired up. There was one gecko, Raffles Seychelles gecko. He's my oldest male. Beautiful 6-stripe. I'm actually still selling him because he wouldn't fire up to save his life. And so everybody kind of passed him over. I'm like, if you only saw, he's gorgeous fired down, but he's just stunning fired up. Yeah. So you know how that goes.
It's awesome. So you have plans to vend again, obviously.
I would love to. I know, I'm going to only do local stuff because, the family and stuff.
Absolutely.
But I'm spoiled because I've got Schaumburg and Tinley right here. So if we can weasel our way into Tinley, I had a blast. The rumor is that you need to vend Schaumburg or St. Louis at least to even have a chance at Tinley. And you can't be a brand new ball python or a crested gecko breeder only. Just because they got 1,001 of those applying. But we've got gargoyles, and I'll probably try to do it again with Nelson because that was such a great experience with him. He was so easy to work with. And we're going to put in for Tinley, see how many years that takes us. But he's got some amazing, I think this might be our ticket in. If anybody's interested in leaf-tailed geckos, his Ebanawi are amazing. I mean, it was the first time I saw him in person. I mean, if we had $1 for everybody who wanted to just gawk at them, he would have made bank. It was one of the most popular animals at the show.
So if you could do anything different, when you vend again, will there be anything that you adjust at all? Will you make any?
Not much. Actually, for my first show, I think it went almost as good as it could possibly go. I would like my animals to be a little bit older because I think people just, it is what it is. I want to buy an older animal too.
Real.
But it's what I had, and I just kind of jumped at the opportunity when it presented itself. All my geckos were at least 3 months old, and all of them were, eating perfectly healthy and ready to go. So I wasn't worried about that, but just from a optics perspective. Plus, they get more expensive and prettier as they get older too. So there's that. The other big thing I would say is, how do I put this without sounding bad? Like, I love kids. I work in education, right? But with my display, it was foam, right? This is not something that's going to last forever, right? If I get, 3 uses out of this enclosure before I have to build another one or make something else, I'll be lucky. Okay. It was literally styrofoam carved, or not styrofoam, insulation foam carved, spray painted. And then the only other thing I did was in the center for the water, I used Flex Seal, liquid Flex Seal, right? That was clear, and I poured that in the middle. So that was the heaviest part, right? I could lift this with like 2 fingers.
That's awesome.
So it was really cool. But it was a kid magnet, and I had no problem with that. I had one person like literally try to dig out the center, and I had to tell them to stop. So learning not how to talk to the kids, but one thing I will say, just as a kind of a public, announcement to anybody going to these shows with kids. I have little kids. We want to interact with you guys. We want to expose. I handed my geckos off to kids to give them their first experience holding one, right? I am so kid-centric, and our table was. But if you have a kid that is just destroying stuff or playing with stuff, and these are animals, and you're just in la-la land, and even after the vendor says, hey, that's really fragile, can you please stop it, or something like that. And you just stand there for another 10 minutes, letting your kid run around. And that was the one negative experience with this whole thing. There was nothing else. Everything else was swimmingly amazing. But I remember just like at the end of day 2, just going, I got to make this thing more bomb proof. So if I need to do something, I need to like really like put some kind of like lacquer on this thing. So I don't care what happens to it. But that was one thing that I just drove me nuts when it's not the kids. I'm not mad at the kids. I was upset with some of the adults just for their lack of respect.
It's like just, absolutely disrespectful, I mean, those are, like you said, living animals and someone's display. It's not a playground or a toy. I mean, a parent should correct it. It's definitely not the child's fault. What's the kid know? The kid's exciting. It's a cool display. If I was a kid, I'd be running
I don't blame them.
Smacking me in the back of the head.
I mean, heck, I was giving away free animal stickers and edible bracelets, like that. Nice. That was the kind of, I mean, I'm going to attract the younger audience, which is
Sure.
great. That's what I want. I want to bring the next generation in, like we've talked about. But it's just, guys, this is not free. This is not cheap. Respect people's displays, respect people's animals. And if you cannot manage your children while you're trying to shop, I didn't bring my kids to the show for a reason, and I could manage them. So
what do you have any other solution for that rather than just building a stronger enclosure? If you
no, I can't teach people how to. I mean, I could teach people how to parent a little bit, but that's not my job, and I'm not going to tell other parents how to run their lives. That's not me, but it's just a culture thing. I think that's something that if enough people in this hobby are okay with it, we're always going to get stragglers that come in that are new that are going to piss somebody off. But at the end of the day, take it with a grain of salt. I didn't yell at anybody. I didn't get upset. I didn't, but it's something that if I had to nitpick one negative thing, that the other thing too, I would say, with the experience is I'm hoping just the general economy gets better, right? And I think everybody will agree with that. Attendance, and Friday was dead. I was so shocked at VIP Friday. No one was there. And I won't say no one, but you know what I mean? Like, I had nobody coming up to my table. Saturday was nice, but it wasn't nearly as crowded as a year before. I mean, I was at the show, I recorded it, I remember what it was like. And then I talked to other vendors who from their perspective, it was a lot slower. Now, that didn't mean we didn't have good days, and we made great sales and we met amazing people, but you could tell that people were not looking to spend as much money, right? And that makes sense, whether it's Geckos or any other luxury item, because they are luxury items. I just hope to God things change.
They will. I'm confident that they will. I mean,
it always ebbs and flows.
As a nation, we can't continue like this. It's
right.
People are losing their shirts. People can't afford to eat. People can't afford to feed their children. People can't afford the gas in their car that they can't pay for to get to work. Like
right. I've never been so glad that my wife talked me out of a giant pickup truck. So I'd love one. So no, I agree, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see in a few months.
It'll get better, man. But people will. The people, at least the reptile vendors and people that are around, I feel, are more passionate now than they were 2 years ago when everything was super hot. The guys that are
you have to be, otherwise you leave.
Vending really love this.
Yeah,
it's because there's not much money being made. Let's be honest. There's not. It's love that's keeping this going right now. It's passion that's keeping this going right now. I mean, people are dropping the prices of animals, and it's sad, man. It's sad because a lot of these projects started when the market was hot,
Right. But you can also look at it as, forest fires are bad, but they're also fantastic because it paves the way to have fertile ground for the new trees to flourish, right? So, this might just be that natural cycle where we're weeding out the people that grew like weeds, during the pandemic. Because I was a pandemic breeder, like I started in 2020. So, you could look at me and say I'm part of that crowd. But at the end of the day, yes, you need to be passionate. Like, I feel bad for anybody who takes, $20,000 out in debt to breed geckos. And I've met people like that, and I don't judge them. I just think that, this is not a get rich quick scheme. I am not rich because of geckos. I'm not rich, if I can, eventually, make $1,000 to take my family on a quick vacation up to Wisconsin, I'd be happy.
Disney, right? Didn't the wife say you got to take her to Disney with?
I got to take her to Disney. We went to Disney, not on gecko money, but on my wife's, brain. And put it that way. She's fantastic. And I'm gonna have to sell a hell of a lot of geckos to repeat that. The Genie Plus is expensive.
You will.
Yeah, eventually. So
eventually you get that one.
I'm just gonna cry when those babies, the ones that are gonna make me that money, I don't want to let go. That's the problem.
Old back rack.
How did you like sharing at the show? How do you think that'll work for the long run? Maybe a new way of vending. People may have to start sharing tables.
Yeah,
I mean,
and which is funny because I know some people that can't get enough tables. Definitely,
some shows won't
especially
allow it. In New York over here,
which
White
is
Plains
fair.
near me, they do not allow shared tables.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Would you feel comfortable telling me what the fee is for a table there?
I don't know because I didn't vend, but I believe when I went to go fill out the vendor's form, the reason I stopped is I had to get a New York State vending license and pay taxes on it, all that. And I was just like, all right, I just pumped the brakes right there because it just bothered me. But I believe it was only like $120.
Yeah, so so Schaumburg was a lot more. So splitting it, I paid more than that. And then electricity is over $100.
I heard there's something about this too. Yeah, electricity is an extra fee.
Yeah,
right.
I know it is for me in
Electricity is a
Arizona
lot
too.
more extra fee.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
And
how do they do that at a show? Like
they walk around and see are you plugged in or are you not? You get charged.
Oh, it's just a flat fee. They're not charging like
yeah.
No,
it's
not
just
wattage.
a flat fee.
It's a flat fee, but they're making money. Don't worry. They're not losing money there. But you want to display your animals, and not everybody has electricity or light. But if we have new cow species, I could have easily not, but they're not going to look as good under the fluorescence there. They're going to look better with the light that I had, the LEDs. So there's pros and cons. We also, even in Illinois, I didn't know this. Thank God it didn't affect me. But if anybody comes from out of state, you have to get your animals checked by their vet. They have a vet that walks around, and you have to have a form filled out. You have to go and list every animal that you're selling, all the species, the number of animals, and then the vet comes around and you pay a fee, I think it was like $55, something like that, to get the certificate. Because if the DNR walks through there and you don't have that, they confiscate all your animals.
And this is every show, or was it a one-time thing?
This is all shows in Illinois, apparently. But here's the thing: it's only out-of-state animals. Because I lived in Illinois and the animals did not cross a border, I didn't have to do any of that.
Okay.
So I learned that because if I want to go up to Wisconsin, they have the same thing.
Right? Florida.
I only live 20 minutes away from Wisconsin. And it would cost me, it might make it more expensive because the shows up there are cheaper, but it might make it just as expensive as down here because I got to pay, extra money just to show them. I don't know. I'll look into it, but I'm not looking to travel and vend every weekend. I don't have the time for it. But if I can do a Schaumburg and a Tinley once a year, and
awesome,
I can, save it. I mean, again, my collection's not huge, so I've got to build up enough animals just to be able to fill a half a table. I only had 11 animals, and I'm probably going to keep some of them now that they didn't sell. So,
how did you do with sales? Did you get rid of anything?
I did. So I sold 3, and I'll take it. I covered the table.
Awesome.
Covered some expenses like the banner and all that stuff, the light that I bought.
Great.
Tracked all of it. And then I traded one for the bioactive enclosure right there, plus some bags of Pangea. So I'm happy. I walked away with about, $100 in cash, and that's it. So I didn't get rich, but
for a great show.
So
great first show.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. So I mean, could it have gone better sales wise? Absolutely. If I was counting it up, and this is where people would get it wrong. If you count what you're asking for, you go, okay, if I sell out, I'm going to make X. The chances of you making half of X is 10% less, So, go into it thinking if I can cover the table, great. And again, I have the luxury of this is not my day job, right? So it's a completely different, again, I'm going to say, I just watched a video by Reach Out Reptiles talking about their experience and how much it costs them, and they're paying people hourly wages to be at their table with them. And, that's a whole nother ball game. But for me, that's just a hobbyist. I'm not investing a whole ton. So my expectations of what I need to move is very low. So, I'm always willing to do deals with people, but I'm also not going to give away my animals when they're asking me for 60% off because I don't need to move them that bad.
Did you find a lot of people asking for deals? Or a lot of people like trying to bargain with you?
No, I was actually hoping they'd do more. So again, if you're at a show, just because there's a sticker price at a show, a lot of people are afraid to. I noticed.
They are.
I never do. If I see an animal and I know it's worth the price, I swear to God, and call me crazy. I don't.
No, I love people like you.
If it's worth, like what's there, and it's that much money.
I know.
Man.
No, you're great.
And I just don't know how to go about the haggling. It's a price. It's I like that or I don't like that. If I don't like, I don't buy. I pay whatever the hell I got to pay to get what I like.
The car dealerships are licking their lips next time you go now.
Oh, he's paying sticker price. Hold on. Whoa.
I don't know. Exactly.
Basically.
And he bought all the add-ons. Shit. But, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's very honorable because you see value in things that do have value, right? And a lot of people don't. So there's the other end of the spectrum. My thought process is I'm not offended if somebody wants to, offer me 10% less. I actually, and I've said this on my podcast before, so it's not a secret. Most of my price, not all of them. If it's already low, it's low, right? I'm trying to move something or give you a deal. But if I got a gecko for $1,000, $1,200, you want to ask me for 10% less, and I think you're actually interested in the animal. You're talking to me. You're doing these kind of things. I'll do everything I can to make it work because A, you're going to feel good about it. I'm going to feel good about it that I got someone who really wants it, cares about it, into a good home, and that to me is worth 10%. So, and plus people love getting the feeling of, hey, I got this for a deal, right?
Yeah.
There's something to that psychology, but on the flip side, right? Because this is my world. To what you're saying is, if you value it enough to pay full sticker price and not even negotiate, you're going to keep that sucker because you paid full price,
Absolutely.
right? And so long term for the animal, right? You don't want to sell them too cheap. Like if I've got a 6-stripe gecko and I sell it for $200, that gecko is going to exchange homes 3-4 times, and that would suck, right? Just the psychology of it, because people don't value it, and that's where I'm not going to price something high just so people value it, but I am going to try to at least be fair, and hopefully you see the value in it. And if not, it's there on Morph Market,
right? So I got one wrap-up question.
Sure.
We always ask this at the end of them. What have been your biggest failures since starting this whole process, and what have you learned from?
Biggest failure was being married when I started this. You need to be single, buy everything you want, and then get married. No, I love you. So my wife's watching this. I love you. All right, but she knows I joke about that. So I would say honestly, my biggest failure. I've had so many failures with other hobbies that I've learned from them, and I don't want to come off as arrogant or pompous, but I haven't had a big failure. Not yet. I've really been strategic and very meticulous on how I've gone about this, right? And maybe I bought some other species a little bit too early, and then I turned that around and made it work for my gargoyles. So if I could go back in time, sorry if I'm thinking about this too long.
No, you're good.
Honestly, I don't have one. Not with this specific gargoyle hobby yet. Things that haven't worked out, I'm glad it hasn't worked out because I've learned from them and become I have a better eye for geckos, or I have a better, experience with, sales, or, one of the things that I'll admit that I made a mistake on, and I've learned from it, but I don't really regret it, is one of my favorite, I'll say clients, but that sounds so sterile. Now friends, I sold them a gecko and had to ship it out. And I was super busy at work and I was rushing. And it was one of those things where I sold this gecko and then I was going to pick a gecko up the next day and, packaged it up. And, I named my geckos based on their parents and then a dash and then the number of it, right? And these geckos looked very similar, but one was the younger sibling and one was the nicer older sibling and fleshed out a little bit more. And I remember the sick feeling when I realized that I got home and I sent the wrong gecko, right?
Ouch.
I sent the wrong gecko. And it wasn't a better gecko. It was a younger gecko. And I'm like, so I called them up and I'm like, you know what? This is an opportunity to just be a man and admit when I mess up and make it right. Right. And so called up this person and they were so cool. I'm like, sit down. You might want to grab a scotch. And I go, you're going to receive your gecko tomorrow. It's the wrong one. I go, it was the one you were also considering, but I will make it right, and we talked back and forth. We worked it out where they actually, shipped it back to me. I paid for it all. That's one thing I was paying off with the geckos I sold at Schaumburg was that mistake. Cause not only do I got to pay for the shipping back to me, but I got to ship out that gecko that I was supposed to ship out again. So, it's paying for it 3 times over. It's a life lesson, but I don't regret it.
But you learn from it, so that's all that matters.
To teach to my kids, and I had that conversation with them.
Handled it perfectly, man. That's you did the right thing. And in this hobby with what's I don't want to say what's going on because it's not like a common thing, but people are doing some shady things, man. You owned it, you didn't do it on purpose, and you corrected it. Yeah. That's good business.
Yeah.
But when I was in my early 20s and money was tight and things like that, man, not everybody. I can sound mature because I am mature now, right? But I don't necessarily, I expect people to grow up, but I also know that when I'm dealing with kids, young, and I consider early 20s kids, even though I got a baby face, this is something that parents need to teach and the community needs to teach and put it out there. What's the right thing to do? Because not everybody has the same code of ethics anymore.
Facts. Yeah. It's unfortunate,
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. It is.
Hopefully, I can get my kids to a good start
because of that. That little mistake will lead to years of good business. That shit.
Well, this community is so small. I mean, could you imagine the reputation? All it takes is one time. This guy screwed me over, sent me the wrong gecko, and then made me pay for shipping. It's like, no. The more I dive into this hobby, especially at a higher echelon, you're not talking about thousands of people, guys. Especially if you're just dealing with gargoyles, like your reputation, your word, your ethics. Oh, dude, you better be okay with what you're putting out there. Even these podcasts, like I'm conscious of what I'm saying. Yeah. You have to be, so that how is this going to come back and bite me in the ass?
If you're a good person, we're not putting on a show. We are who we are. I mean, we all different. We all do things a little different, but our hearts are all in this, man. So if anyone was to take anything we say as negative or personal for that matter, I mean, that's a them problem, man. We're good people talking geckos and talking about what we do. We support everything that every single one of you out there does. Every podcast I'm in, literally preach about how adamant I am about how the little girl with the salamander is just as important in this hobby as the guy breeding 10,000 king snakes. We all make up this community. We all matter. And as long as we respect each other and treat each other the way we want to be treated, everything will be is fine. We can be individual.
Except for the spider people. They're just weird.
Yeah. Jason's a soon-to-be spider.
Yeah, actually, I am.
I had to throw that out there. So, actually, one of my, I got too many stories. Sorry, guys, I'm talking. One of my coworkers, her husband bought a gecko from me, and he's awesome. And so we connected over fish and geckos, and then she ended up, she really wanted to get she had tarantulas, but they had, passed as they don't live as long. So I helped her kind of go to a store and find a jumping spider. So there's some cool stuff out there. Some cool stuff with arachnids.
Yeah, my girlfriend
You
just
like that
got,
kind of
she
thing, I
has
guess.
2 jumping
I
spiders
mean, I'm
now.
never gonna own one. There you go. I can appreciate them. Like, I love the look of birds. I'm never gonna own a bird. Okay,
Yeah.
it just not my jam.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So yeah.
All right, Bobby,
But
we're
good
coming up on
times.
almost 2 hours. Where can everybody find you at?
I do that to people. Oh, you can find me anywhere except for TikTok. So I still have Facebook, even though it's been acting weird. Instagram for sure. Please follow me on Instagram. It's crazy how few Instagram followers I have compared to YouTube. So YouTube, obviously, Gecko Cove. Feel free to follow me there. Content will be sporadic, so don't expect it every week, but it'll be a lot of fun when I do throw it out there. And if you have any requests, feel free to DM me and ask me for a specific video. I'm always looking for new ideas. I've got a bunch myself, but as soon as I have time, if you have a really good one, I'll put it to the top of the list. Also, I just want to put it out there that, I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy with a room full of geckos. My family thinks I'm weird as hell. And so, if you feel like that weirdo and you want to reach out, I'm not saying we're going to become BFFs and hang out every weekend, but I'm always happy to chat with you online, answer, when I say dumb questions, ask me questions that are so dumb that I have to give you an answer, because you know what? We're just learning, and that's the way we're going to make this hobby fantastic, is by asking those dumb questions. So please reach out. There's nothing that I'm going to go and judge you on. That's how I started. I remember reaching out to Red Rack, right, who I saw on YouTube, and asking him questions. He's a great guy too. So please do that.
Nice.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you guys again. Like Bobby said, man, check them out, man. The kid's doing great things for this hobby, man. I've watched him grow, man, and it's beautiful. Check him out, watch him. You guys will guarantee to learn something from his channel. Learn with him, learn with us. We're all learning. It's a great hobby, man. We're all trying to make it a little bigger, a little better, and put information out there, for everyone to comprehend. We want everyone to have at least the tool to give their animals the best life possible, to be as successful as possible with their animal. Yep. Check out Jason too. Is on Instagram, Ghouls and Geckos. He's doing some crazy stuff with some Australian species, and he's got plenty of announcements on all types of geckos I can't even pronounce coming.
Nice.
And thanks for watching us, guys, man. We really appreciate it, man. We're here for you guys, man. We're here for the people. If there's information to be had, we will get it to you.
Yeah. Anthony, Jason, thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute honor. And guys, if you're watching this, okay, and you've made it this far into the video and you have not liked and subscribed to this channel, shame on you. Shame on you. No, please go do it right now. Right now, go hit that like button. Awesome. All right. Share it with a friend. Do all that YouTube mumbo jumbo.
Yeah,
and
right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
really
you, Bobby. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate it, Bobby. Thank you very much,
Pleasure.
man.
Have a good one.
You too.
Have a great night.